Welcome back to Shenouda Podcast. Today we're taking a closer look at a truly towering figure in modern Coptic Orthodox history, Saint Archdeacon Habib Girgis.
Absolutely. A major figure.
He was formally recognized, canonized as a saint by the Holy Synod back in 2013. It was really a recognition of a whole lifetime dedicated to, well, revitalizing faith and education in the church.
Mm-hmm. A lifetime's work.
Yeah. We've gathered insights from historical texts, church biographies, scholarly discussions, really trying to understand his remarkable journey.
Quite a story.
So our mission today is to unpack his life, his powerful writings, those enduring teachings, and really get to the heart of why the church reveres him as a saint.
And there's a lot to unpack there. It's an inspiring story, especially when you consider the time he lived in.
Definitely. So let's start at the beginning. Habib Girgis was born in Cairo, 1876.
That's right. And he faced hardship early on. His father died when he was just 6 years old.
Wow, only 6?
Yeah. But his mother, Miriam, she gave him a strong religious upbringing. She made sure he was enrolled in the Great Coptic School.
Okay, so education was valued early on in his family despite the circumstances.
It seems so.
So let's set the scene. We're talking late 19th, early 20th century. What was the Coptic Church actually like back then? It sounds like it was a challenging period.
Oh, immensely challenging. I mean, you have to picture widespread illiteracy. And not just among, the lay people.
Right.
Even among the clergy. Finding educated priests was rare.
So spiritual teaching must have been quite limited.
Very limited. Often the main form of teaching was maybe a priest reading a page or two from an old manuscript during the liturgy.
Just reading it out.
Yeah, with very little, sometimes no actual preaching or explanation.
So a real spiritual gap then. That must have caused some tensions within the church itself.
Absolutely. There were intense internal struggles brewing. You had clashes between the church hierarchy and the educated Coptic lay leaders.
What were they clashing about?
Often it was over control of church finances, but also this big push for education. The lay leaders saw the need, but faced resistance.
How serious did these conflicts get?
Serious enough that Pope Kyrillos V was actually banished for a time because of them.
Banished. Wow. That really underscores the turmoil.
It really does. And it wasn't just internal problems.
Right, you mentioned challenges. There are external forces,
At the
too.
same time, you had powerful Protestant and Catholic missionaries actively working in Egypt.
And what was their aim?
Well, their stated goal was often to influence Copts. They sometimes portrayed the Coptic faith as, archaic or stagnant, partly to raise funds back home.
So essentially trying to re-Christianize the Copts, as some sources put it.
Exactly. And this posed a serious threat to Coptic identity, which was already under pressure.
It sounds like a perfect storm of internal and external challenges. A dark time, really.
A very dark time. And it's into this atmosphere, this sort of darkness, that Habib Girgis emerges.
And Pope Shenouda III had a powerful way of describing this era, didn't he?
He did, very vividly. He said, "The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep."
Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and the light was a big goodness.
Yes. And it's so clear Pope Shenouda saw Habib Girgis as that light.
As the one bringing light into that darkness.
Precisely. His work was seen as that divine intervention, bringing clarity and hope.
So a major part of that light was education. Pope Kyrillos V saw the need, right, for trained clergy.
He absolutely did. Recognizing this urgent need, he established the modern Theological College in 1893. The specific goal was training young men for the priesthood.
And Habib Girgis was there from the get-go, one of the very first students.
Right at the beginning. And what's truly amazing, I think, is that the seminary initially didn't even have a dedicated theology teacher.
Really? So how did they learn?
Well, Habib Girgis, his thirst for knowledge was just unquenchable. He didn't wait. He essentially taught himself. He went to the Patriarchal library and just devoured everything. Manuscripts, books. He read constantly, took meticulous notes, did his own research. He basically built his own theological education.
That's incredible drive, especially for a young student. Did he seek out any mentors?
He did. He wasn't just relying on books. He sought mentorship from Father Philatheos Abraham.
And he was known as a great preacher.
Yes, one of the only truly eloquent preachers of that time. Habib Girgis learned a lot from him, combining that intense self-study with practical wisdom.
His talent must have been obvious pretty quickly.
Oh, definitely. So much so that while he was still in his final year of study, they actually appointed him to teach religion to the first-year students.
Teaching before he even graduated, that says a lot.
It really does. And then, upon graduation in 1898, He immediately got a full-time position teaching theology and homiletics, the art of preaching.
And he was still very young at this point.
Remarkably young, just 22. And almost immediately, he started leading efforts to really advance the seminary itself, acquiring land, overseeing new building construction.
So administrative skills too, not just academic brilliance.
Yeah, exactly. He had the vision and the practical ability to make things happen. By 1912, he was ordained an archdeacon.
Archdeacon Habib Girgis.
And then in 1918, Pope Kyrillos V formally appointed him as the second dean of the Theological Seminary.
The dean. And how long did he hold that position?
An incredible 53 years, right up until his passing.
53 years as dean. That's a lifetime of dedication just to the seminary.
It is. But his vision for education went much, much broader than just the clergy.
Okay, so he saw the need beyond the seminary walls.
Deeply. He felt that preaching just to adults, while important, wasn't enough, especially with those external missionary pressures we talked about.
Right, the threat to Coptic identity.
Exactly. So he thought, how do you build a stronger foundation? How do you nurture faith and identity from the very beginning?
And this leads us to one of his most famous contributions.
Yes, the Sunday school movement. This is where things get truly visionary, I think. He decided to establish Sunday schools right at the turn of the century, starting in 1900.
1900. Now, put that in context for us.
Get this. This was 15 years before Egyptian public schools even existed.
15 years. So he was pioneering childhood education, not just religious education.
In many ways, yes. He understood that nurturing faith in young children was the absolute bedrock for any kind of Coptic renaissance.
And Pope Cyril V supported this.
Yes, his vision aligned perfectly. The Pope issued decrees, one in 1899 and another in 1903, emphasizing how important it was to teach children, to deepen their faith.
So how did he start? What did these early Sunday schools look like?
He started small, gathering little groups of children, teaching them a simple catechism, questions and answers, mostly through memorization. That was the seed.
Simple beginnings. But starting something so new couldn't have been easy. Was there pushback?
Oh, absolutely. Initially, he faced resistance, even from some of the more traditional or perhaps illiterate priests who maybe felt a bit threatened by this new approach.
How did he handle that?
Well, he was clever about it. Instead of fighting them, he kind of gave them ownership of the classes. He involved them.
Make them part of the solution.
Exactly. And as they started seeing the positive results, the kids learning, the families engaging, acceptance grew.
He wasn't just teaching lessons, though. He was thinking much bigger, wasn't he? Like, about the curriculum itself.
Far bigger. This wasn't just ad hoc. He actually designed entire curricula. He developed 6 volumes specifically for Sunday school teachers.
6 volumes. What did they cover?
Amazing stuff for the time. Child psychology, age-appropriate lessons, different teaching methods for different age groups. A truly structured, thoughtful approach.
That's incredibly forward-thinking for the early 1900s.
It really was. And he didn't stop there. He was a strong advocate for girls' education, too.
How did he promote that?
He set up separate meetings specifically for girls, led by women teachers. He even established a special organization just to supervise female ministry. It was a very holistic view of education for everyone.
What about reaching those who couldn't read? The illiterate population was large then.
Right. He couldn't rely on texts alone, so he got innovative. One key method was iconography.
Using religious pictures?
Exactly. He printed literally millions of religious pictures, mostly sourced from Europe. And on the back of each picture, there'd be a relevant Bible verse and a short summary of a lesson.
Making faith accessible visually.
Yes. His belief was a picture tells 1,000 words, and the scale was huge. In just 9 months, between 1948 and 1949, he published 3.25 million of these pictures.
3.25 million in 9 months.
Distributed all across Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia. It was mass religious education through images.
Wow. And he was also a poet, right? Did that play a role?
It did, significantly. He was a gifted poet and wrote 6 volumes of hymns. But these weren't just hymns for worship. They were teaching tools.
How so?
He taught Christian doctrine through traditional Coptic melodies. This was crucial. It helped preserve Coptic identity and heritage, especially against the growing influence of Western music. Faith and culture intertwined.
That's a really smart way to embed teaching. What about reaching remote areas?
He organized summer programs. Sunday school teachers would actually travel out to Coptic homes in rural villages.
What did they find there?
Often, the spiritual state was quite dismal. They reported finding people who barely knew they were Christian, children who hadn't been baptized.
A real need,
A
then.
huge need. So the teachers would place icons in the homes, distribute gospels, and importantly, they'd report these issues back to regional committees Habib Girgis had set up.
Creating a system for outreach and follow-up?
Exactly. He even experimented with literacy methods like the Lobot method, sort of an each one teach one approach to tackle illiteracy directly in the villages.
Very practical.
And he encouraged priests to be more mobile, too. Take the holy altar board, the tabot, out to these remote villages and pray liturgy with the people there.
Bringing the church to the people. His administrative skills seem remarkable, too, setting up these structures.
They were clear procedures, canons for how Sunday school should operate. It wasn't just passion, it was organized.
And did this movement grow significantly over time?
It took time, dedication, but yes, you can see the scale by 1941 when the first big Sunday school teacher conference was held.
How many attended?
Around 400 teachers came. It showed just how far the movement had come, but remember, that was after 40 years of tireless work by Habib Girgis.
40 years, that patience, that persistence, it really speaks volumes.
It's a huge part of his legacy, and I think a key reason the church sees him as a saint. That unwavering commitment over decades.
So looking at all this incredible work, the seminary, the Sunday schools, the writings, the outreach, what was the core belief driving him? What held it all together?
What really boils down to this. Habib Girgis was utterly convinced that the Coptic Church's identity, its faith, its future, could only be secured and strengthened through education.
Education as the key.
The absolute key. And his approach was, as we've seen, truly holistic. He wasn't just focused on one group. He aimed to uplift everyone: kids, youth, seminarians, women, villagers, even workers.
One area he seemed particularly passionate about was the priesthood itself, pushing for proper training.
Oh, incredibly passionate about that. He argued very forcefully that no one should be ordained a priest without a proper theological education.
He made comparisons, didn't he?
He did. He compared the priest's role, calling it lofty and critical, to that of a doctor or an engineer or a judge.
Professions that require rigorous training.
Exactly. His point was, why should the priesthood be any different? He really lamented when clergy were ordained without that solid theological grounding. He saw it as a fundamental weakness for the church.
That insistence on quality and preparation, it's a powerful message.
And it's central to his teachings and his vision for a stronger church.
Alongside theological education, he also championed the Coptic language, didn't he?
Yes, very much so. He saw reviving the Coptic language as essential for reclaiming Coptic identity and heritage. He encouraged studying ancient manuscripts, connecting back to the roots.
And he practiced what he preached. He was a prolific writer himself.
Incredibly prolific. Over 30 religious books published. Major works like the Seven Sacraments of the Church, the Consoler of the Faithful, the Mystery of Piety.
Foundational texts for many Copts.
Absolutely. Plus, he wrote multiple series of textbooks, Summary of Faith Fundamentals, Orthodox Christian Principles, which weren't just used in Coptic schools, but became formal textbooks in government schools, too.
Wow, so his influence extended even into the secular education system.
To some extent, yes. He was really shaping the educational landscape across the board.
And then there was his journal, Al-Karma, the Vine.
Right. Launched in 1907, Al-Karma became such a vital platform. It wasn't just devotional. It published really profound articles.
What kind of topic?
Patristic literature, church canon law, discussions on science and religion, biblical studies, theology,
Right.
plus his own spiritual sermons.
So fostering intellectual life within the church.
Precisely. One of his disciples said you could find everything in the vine, wisdom, philosophy, deep spirituality, even that blend of science and religion. It was crucial for spreading knowledge.
Beyond all these accomplishments, what was he like as a person? What was his character?
By all accounts, his character was defined by meekness, simplicity, a real kindness of heart.
Humble despite his influence.
Very much so.
Yeah.
He had an eloquent voice, but it was authoritative, too. People described him as fair, compassionate, and maybe most remarkably, he apparently never bore a grudge against those who resisted his efforts.
That's incredible considering the resistance he must have faced.
It is. That humility, that forgiving spirit, combined with this unwavering vision. That's sainthood material, isn't it?
It really sounds like it. And his ideas about teaching itself were so modern.
Way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
He taught that teaching isn't just dictating orders or advice.
What did he say it was?
He called it the participation between the teacher and the child in a common spirit of knowledge.
Participation, so not top-down instruction.
No. He wanted teachers to be facilitators, to let children discover things for themselves, to find pleasure and happiness in learning. The goal was to ignite an inner desire for knowledge.
That sounds like educational philosophy you'd hear today.
Exactly, in the early 20th century. And he saw the real-world impact. He told this story
What story was that?
about a 12-year-old boy. The boy attended Sunday school for the very first time. He went home that day, gathered his family, and led them in prayer and Bible reading.
Just from one Sunday school session.
Yes. And according to the story, it inspired the whole family to start practicing family prayer together, something they hadn't done before.
Wow. That perfectly illustrates the ripple effect, doesn't it? One child's education transforming a whole family.
It shows the power of what he was building, community by community, family by family.
And through it all, facing obstacles, facing resistance, he just kept going. He had some powerful sayings about that, didn't he?
He really did. He famously said, "Despite efforts that sucked my health and crushed my strength, I did not surrender for one day."
Stones are thrown only at the trees that are filled with fruits.
That's the one. He saw resistance as almost a sign he was doing something right. He apparently smiled at it, forgave opponents, saying, "There is no honey without the bee sting."
That kind of resilience, that faith in the face of adversity, it's truly inspiring.
Absolutely. And Pope Shenouda III, again, summarized his impact so well.
What did he say?
He said, "Habib Girgis established a strong foundation, and many built upon it. Perhaps others were able to build higher, but without his foundation, they would not have been able to build at all. He was the one who labored, and all of us have entered into his labor."
That's powerful, acknowledging that foundational work that enabled everything that came after.
It perfectly captures his role, the pioneer.
So this incredible life of service and faith eventually led to his formal recognition by the Church. St. Archdeacon Habib Girgis passed away on August 21st, 1951.
And then, decades later, on June 20th, 2013, the Holy Synod, presided over by Pope Kyrillos II, officially canonized him as a saint.
A confirmation of what many already knew. His feast day is celebrated on Missouri 15.
Yes. And he's remembered exactly as Pope Shenouda described him, the pioneer of religious education in modern Coptic history. More than just a teacher, people called him a school, even a university in himself.
He really embodies positive work in the Church. That love for education, the meekness, the zeal, all those virtues we've talked about.
He truly does.
And his story, it really does challenge us today, doesn't it? When you think about your own service or just your own spiritual life, can you see reflections of his work? Why is education still so vital?
It makes you think, absolutely. How can we deepen our own understanding of our faith? What sacrifices are we willing to make for spiritual education beyond just, time or money?
Habib Girgis himself said something profound about that, about priorities.
He did. He said, "The greatest need for any community after bread is education."
After bread, that's how fundamental he saw it.
Exactly. And he had that other saying, instead of cursing the darkness, light a candle. Imagine if we all just lit our one candle, the collective light would be immense.
A powerful image. He also posed those three questions right at the beginning of his teaching career.
Right. In his very first lecture. 1, how did Christianity begin? 2, what are its benefits and effects on the world? And 3, what are the characteristics of true Christians?
And his life really answered that third question, didn't it?
It did. He showed us the answer. To be Christ-like, saintly, pure, a light to the world. That's the challenge he leaves for us to apply that in our own lives.
A fitting legacy. And that concludes our discussion on the life and legacy of St. Archdeacon Habib Girgis.
A truly remarkable figure.
Indeed. If you want to learn more about Habib Girgis, please visit Shenouda Press.